Hey there everyone. In celebration of Watercolor Month, Faber-Castell was cool enough to send over some of these new watercolor products that I wanted just to swatch for you real quick to show you what they look like. I think it's fantastic to have a lot of options, especially when it comes to how you're working within your journal or just expressing your own artistic freedom, whether it is, again, journaling or in your own art. So what they sent me is really cool. Excited to get this all out here and start to share it with you a little bit with this quick video. So the first piece that we're going to be looking at here is actually these really fantastic Albrecht Dürer watercolor markers. Inside of this we have our main colors here, so a lot of our foundational, just yellow, red, we have blue, green, and black here as well. And we'll be swatching them out and showing how to mix some of them as well in here too. Over here, never used these before and I'm really excited to. These are actually gelatos. If you've ever used these before, they're pigment sticks that you can use for coloring. And in this case, they come with a really cool kit along with a silicone mixing tray here to add that to your watercolor paper as well. The kit that they have also comes with this really nice watercolor brush, which we'll fill up in just a minute. And the other thing we're going to be trying today are these really cool GoldFaber Aqua watercolored pencils. So beautiful kit here, filled with watercolor pencils. If you've never used these before, I've used them every now and again and experimented a bit, but we'll show you how beautifully these both lay down on paper as a colored pencil, but then when you add water to them, the new effect that you get from that. So the first thing I'm gonna do is actually fill up the brush. This brush comes along with the gelato kit that we have here. The way it works is it has our cap. Inside of here it has a small sponge, that's where the water is. There's a water squeezer here, but this actually fills up similar to a syringe. Now, if you've used any other watercolor pens before, or water pens, they all fill differently, but what I really thought was cool about this is that there's a plunger here on the back that you pull up, similar to a syringe, that brings the water into the pen. If you don't have enough, you can always push it up a little bit and get it out, but I actually got a good amount of water. You just screw back on the pen tip nice and easily, and then you have your pen filled with water, which we'll just use for this entire demo. Now I'm also going to keep this water just close to me, the reason being that to keep this quick, I'm going to have to rinse my brush quickly in between colors also so they don't mix when I don't want them to. But usually you can just push out some extra water or use a napkin or a rag, or in this case a paper towel, to wipe it off on as you go. So the first ones that we're going to demo here are actually going to be these markers. So I've used watercolor markers before, mostly for hand lettering, which looks really beautiful. These you can use inside of a regular bullet journal or any type of journal. Just know that depending on the paper, it may ghost or bleed depending how heavy you use it. Now in mine, I'm currently using an Archer Olive Notebook, which is just our standard notebook, and they work well. When I add water to them, things can get a little bit tricky. They do have a watercolor notebook that you can use that actually has cold pressed paper if you're interested. And I've also seen other notebooks out there that do the same thing. But for this, we're going to use just a common Strathmore watercolor cold pressed paper so you can really see how nice these look and how they lay out. What I really liked about these markers is that they are dual tip. So on one side you have a brush, and then on the other side you have more of a blunted end here. So depending on what you're doing and how you're using it, you really do have a lot of really great options. Now, something that I did notice about doing this is that as I'm filling these out, you can color in an entire space. So let's use this color here to actually fill in this entire hexagon. And I'll show you how beautifully it both covers the space, and then when you add the water on top of it, it really adds a really beautiful watercolor effect. Anytime you're using a watercolor marker, you can do this. But really what you're doing is just filling it out and then going over top of it with your pen and adding that water, and then it just starts to mix together and create the different transparencies and flow really beautifully. Next we'll do the red, and for this one what I'll do is just show you what it looks like if you kind of go over it quickly that way. And it does the same effect of brushing out from the heavy in the middle and then coming out on the edges, which is really nice. The more water you put, the more that color is going to mix together and feather out to get a really beautiful look. We'll go for the blue next. I love how vibrant this blue is. Looks amazing just as the brush itself, but when you start to add the water on top, it really makes it come out. Blue's my absolute favorite color, so anytime I get to use it, you'll see me using a lot of that in my journals and other places as well. We'll go ahead with this green here, and for this one I'll actually use not the brush tip, but the other flat tip here on this side and do the same thing. This feels more like drawing with a marker, and if that's what you're going for, then that's perfect. I found the brush tip to be really nice for, of course, brush lettering and things along that line, or if you want to get more of that feel of actually using a brush with a marker, it feels really nice. And then last we'll go in with the black one. This is just going to be a really dark, thick black that's going to go down, so I'll just fill this out quickly. Again, what you'll get with this is more of the feathering around when you're using your brush. So again, you're going to get the really heavy black in the middle, and then as you add the water, you'll be able to feather that out and spread that color more. Of course, it's wonderful to use the black if you want to darken up any of these as you go through. And you only have to add a little bit. As you can see, a lot of pigment in there, which is beautiful. So some of the stuff I was trying to do with these pens and experiment with was if you wanted to create some different layers, if you wanted to create some different textures underneath. So that's one thing that I really did like about these as well, is anytime you draw with the marker, I have to be careful since I'm a lefty not to go over my watercolor, is you can come back over it with your brush, and what you'll get is a mixture of both the feathering of the paint or the marker with the watercolor, and then you'll still be able to see that textured lines underneath of it. So you can create some really cool dynamic shapes and shading with that as well. Something else that I do with markers, and you can do with these, is use any type of plastic, or in this case I'll use the silicone palette here, and just take your marker and just draw out a little bit. And then you can do the same thing. Take your water and you can start to mix it and then add that. So if you want to work with these colors and still get the vibrancy of them, but you don't want to draw right on your paper or right in that journal or wherever you're using this, you can just come right onto a palette and bring it over as well. This also works really nicely when you start to mix colors, because you can mix on a palette, add the extra water that you want or need, and then bring it over. And what's great is then you can reactivate this, so even if it dries on here a little bit, you can just add more water to it. What I wanted to do here next was actually mix two colors, so I'm going to take the blue and I'm going to add it here to the outline of the hexagon down here, and then I'm going to take this yellow here and finish out the outline here. And then now what this will do for me is it'll start to mix the colors more, but this just goes to show different ways that you can use the water and these pens together to create some really cool effects and some really cool colors. And one of my other favorite things that I've been doing with this recently is doing a really dark kind of circle shape in the middle here. And then taking my brush and filling that in, so you get this really cool kind of 3D effect off of this, because you've got the dark pigment in the shape in the middle, and then you fill out the outside, and then once this dries, if you want, in this case I'm using a hexagon, but I could easily connect those lines and then it starts to look like a jewel or something like that. So again, those are the Albrecht Dürer watercolor markers from Faber-Castell. Look really cool on here. Once it dries more, I'll give you more of a close-up. The next thing that we're going to try are going to be the gelatos. Now again, I have never used gelatos before. I've heard about them. I've seen other people use them, but personally never used them myself. So what I'm going to do real quick is I'm just going to just dampen this paper towel real quick and just wipe up this red so I don't mix any of those colors unintentionally. So the way gelatos work is they are just kind of a pigment that are here, They kind of feel like an oil pastel, I think is the best way that I can describe them. And in this case, this kit again comes with the silicone mixing tray. It comes with these 8 colors, and it also comes with the brush as well. So if you're looking for kind of a whole kit together, this is a really great way to start. They also have some really cool colors inside of here. So we've got the banana, we've got raspberry, we've got snow cone, which sounds delicious right now in the summer. We also have red cherry, mango, lime, black licorice, and the bright bubble gum. Now, these don't smell like anything. I was thinking about the markers that are out there that have a scent to them, but these don't have a scent to them, which is good, especially personally not a fan of black licorice. But what's really cool in how you use these is you can do them a few ways. You can draw with these gelatos right on paper and then add the water over top. And the reason you get this palette is so you can take the gelato stick and just rub it onto the silicone here, and then you'll be able to use that along with your brush and add it straight to your paper. What's really cool about this too is that it makes it really easy to mix colors. So you can put down a little bit of one color with something next to it. Say you want to make it darker, you could add the black to it to make it darker to give it more of a shade. There isn't a white pigment inside of here, and I kind of wish that there was to add some different tints to it, but that's okay. We will go with the 8 that we get. The pigment feels really nice too as you're putting it on here. I think the light blue that's here, I think that's the snow cone one, is a little bit light, so you can always add some different colors to it to darken it up a little bit, but you'll see what it looks like on the paper. So what I'm going to do quickly is just go ahead and swatch each one of these for you. I'm not going to talk a lot while I'm doing it, but you'll be able to see what they start to look like. So as you saw, I was adding the water to this palette here. They really just kind of melt and create a really thin, nice, liquidy watercolor. Now on the sheet itself, you can see they definitely are much lighter than the markers that were here. What's cool is that, of course, you can let this dry a little bit and then go back over it again with the color, but it also does add a really nice difference to kind of how you're doing it. Much of a lighter kind of approach to things. And what's great about this palette is that you can just take another damp cloth if you want and clean it up really easily. It also looks very cool. And then you're ready to reuse this again easy. So the cleanup is super easy with something like this. Now the last thing that we're going to use are the Faber-Castell GoldFaber Aqua colored pencils. Now this is a beautiful kit, 36 different colors, amazing colors to use. We have whites, blacks, golds, silvers, along with everything in between. Now, having not used these a lot for my own personal use, I don't know exactly how it's going to turn out. This is really the first time that I'm using it, but what I'd expect for it is to go on similar to a color pencil and then maybe have some of that texture underneath of it. So let's go ahead and try a few colors here and see how it works out. Now, along with this, I'm going to try some of the other ways that I use this over here. So I'm actually just going to color the edge of this one. and then see what kind of effect we get there in the middle. And then I'll do the same thing here. I'll just color in the center of this one and see what we get on the outside. And then let's try the gold. I'm always very interested to see how the metallics look. Okay, so we'll go ahead and take our brush again. Well, I don't have to dip it in water because it already has water in it, but I'll use it between. And we'll just go over top of it and see what that looks like and what it feels like. So right off the bat, the pigment is just kind of like melting. It's really nice. Turns right into watercolor. So that was really great. I think especially maybe if you were out and about and wanted to use some of these and then watercolor it later. Look how nicely that just lays straight out there. You actually can't see much of that texture underneath of there. A little bit of the texture, but I bet you if I added more water to it, it would start to go away a bit. Let's see what this looks like. Really bright, not muted at all. Okay, for this one, we're going to just do the edge like we did on the other one and see what this one looks like. So you can see, still can see a little bit of the outline of where I had that, but it actually creates a really cool effect, I think, on it. Where maybe if you were to turn this into a jewel or something like that, if you wanted to, I'm only saying jewel just because it kind of looks like that, but that you could easily do that with these and get the effect that you want. So for this one, I added the color to the middle, used the brush, and then pulled that color out. So again, it kind of gives that raised appeal. And then for this one is the gold. I'm always interested in golds and the metallics with any kind of paints or markers because you never kind of know what you're going to get. I don't see this being like glittery. It is still wet a little bit, but you do kind of see that metallic. Now it's wet, so it has a nice shine to it, of course. But we'll see what that looks like when it dries a little bit. Now, some things I wanted to try was just kind of mixing some colors to see what we get. So similarly to how we did it in the other ones, adding colors to the top and the bottom and then mixing it. And then let's try it maybe with these. And instead of just top and bottom, we'll just do a whole, we'll kind of fill the whole thing. The darks really do go on pretty dark. I think you'd have to add a lot of water to this if you really wanted to kind of fade that out into there. So something maybe just to think about as you're using them. In this case, now I really filled the whole hexagon with those two colors. So again, same thing. The darker colors really hold on there, so the lighter colors seem like they blend out a bit better. And let's go ahead and just try maybe a quick color mixing. So let's take this and this, some random colors that I'm picking, and let's do kind of like a hatching effect. And we'll hatch over that with the other color. So it does pick up some of that color, and then you can still see the pencil lines underneath of there a little bit for a cool effect. And then I'm just curious, I don't think I can really do it, but let's see maybe if I just almost treat this like it was something else, if I can just kind of pull the color off of the top of this. Oh, it actually worked really well. So in this case, I'm just taking the brush and rubbing it against the top of there to pull off some of that color for detail. All right, so I've gone ahead and let this dry a little bit, so I thought we'd take a closer look at everything. So over here on the left are the Albrecht Dürer watercolor markers. So again, you can see really beautiful, intense colors that are through here. We've mixed these together on this side. This one here is one that we took from the palette onto the page, so you can see that it definitely has a bit of a different feel than when you're drawing directly onto the paper. The middle ones here are the watercolor with the gelatos that we did, so a lot more of like a pastel feel to them. Again, once they dry, you could easily pick up some more of that color and go over top to get more of that intense color. And then over here on the right-hand side are the GoldFaber Aqua watercolor pencils. So we did a few different techniques here, and I definitely wanted to see what it looked like when it was dry. So on this one, we used that darker color and just kind of drew on it quickly, a good amount of pressure. And then what happened there is that it definitely spread out the watercolor, but you can see some of those lines. So if you're using things like this, you can definitely take that into consideration with your technique. This one here, we gave a little bit more coverage and used the water over top so you're not seeing any of that texture. This one here, we just filled out the outline quickly with a little bit of pressure with that darker color. So I think, again, more water or more layers of the water over top of it. Or if you wanted to, you could even just take the pencil again and go over it and then go with some water. This one we filled out with just the center color and then pulled it out. This was the gold, so now that it's dried, it definitely doesn't have a shimmer to it at all, but you can see that it has that gold copper kind of feel to it. And then some of our experimentation here, again, we were coloring at the top, pulling it down. We mixed two colors here. Again, this had more pressure and was a darker color, so you can see more of the stroke versus the top. This one I really love. This is the two colors that we mixed using hatching and then went over top of it, and you can still see the color through there. And this last one is actually what we did. We used the water brush and pulled that off of the pencil tip itself and went straight on. So this has a little bit more of that watercolor, that normal watercolor look that you would get. So hopefully you learned a handful of things about not just these products, but maybe other watercolor techniques that you can take for your own art or to use in your own journal. Now, just to cover myself, like I said, you can use watercolor inside of your journal. I've had a lot of positive experiences with it, but it is very much going to depend on the type of paper. The paper that we used here today was the Strathmore watercolor cold press paper, but you want to make sure that you're testing maybe on a sheet or something in the back before you go in with a full design, because certain paper, if it is too thin, will just bleed right through. It's not really made for it. I mentioned before that I use Archer and Olive notebooks currently. They do have a watercolor notebook that actually is dot grid. I've been playing around with it. I'll have some future posts in the near future on different ideas that you can do with this. But as you can see with that paper, it doesn't bleed through and there's no ghosting, even though some of this, in this case, I really drenched the paper and the watercolor on here to get this. And then just recently I was just trying some different fruits maybe to see. But again, using the different pieces in here, we'll have some different ideas on how you might be able to utilize this inside of your bullet journal. But just again, make sure that you're looking at the type of paper that's there or testing on a back page. So again, thank you so much for watching today, and a special thank you to Faber-Castell for sending me these great products to try out for you as well. So hope you have a fantastic day. Hope you stay productive, stay creative, and I'll talk to you soon.